to this report.
There being no objection to leave being granted, the member has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. Housing is a human right. We don't always describe it as such in this country because we don't have a National Charter of Human Rights. But it would be the rare person that would put up an argument to say that housing, decent, secure shelter is anything other than a human right and is anything other than necessary to be able to have an engaged, a decent and a happy life. But sadly, homelessness can happen to anyone. And it's important as we consider the recommendations of this report that those of us in this Parliament and more widely remember that we're not just talking about one cohort of society. We're not just talking perhaps about damaged and difficult people who have spent their lives on the edges. Importantly, that's who we are talking about, and it's our duty to work to make their lives better. But we are talking about anyone and everyone who can become homeless at any time. Two examples from my electorate. Jane, who lives in Frankston in May of this year, who has a son with a disability, received a notice to vacate her rental property. She can't get any assistance. The state MPs have called all of the caravan parks in my electorate, which are all at capacity and have no availability. And a local charity was advising her to stay in her rental unit until an order of possession was issued to try to buy some more time just to find accommodation. Samantha from Seaford in July of this year contacted my office because she can't find affordable housing in the area. And she said, and I quote, "I'm trying my absolute best to create a stable, loving home environment for my daughter. But with the income I receive and the daily cost of living, it's quite simply unmanageable. After I pay our rent, bills, buy food, pay for petrol and childcare, I have nothing left." That's why the work that the committee I'm very proud to be on did is important. That's why the Minister at the table's response to the recommendations in this report are so important. It's for people like Jane and Samantha. It's for the 44,152 Victorian households waiting for social housing. It's for the people in the southeast and the east of Melbourne, where 32% of Victorians in those areas are experiencing homelessness, and 40% of people on the social housing waiting list live in these regions, one of which is mine. The state government in Victoria's big build of $5.6 billion will make a big difference, but we need to have the federal government adopt all but one of the recommendations of this report and work collaboratively with states across the country to do the heavy lifting to address homelessness and housing affordability. I proudly stand here endorsing the Youth 2 campaign in my electorate, which is advocating for a youth educational foyer and Frankston and Rosebud crisis accommodation for young people, which fits squarely into the housing first model that the chair of the committee spoke about in his contribution and which all of us on the committee enthusiastically endorse. You know, in my electorate and the Mornington Peninsula, there's been a 50% increase in the rate of young people requesting assistance with housing during COVID, some 390 requests in 2019-2020. You know, 390 requests from people aged between 15 to 25 for housing with no crisis accommodation locally and insufficient coordination of assistance. So the Youth 2 Alliance, who asked for $15.5 million over 4 years, which in the scheme of the money that's been spent recently by the federal government is nothing. But to people in my community, to young people in my community experience homelessness is so much for a youth foyer and for crisis accommodation. And it fits, as I said, squarely into the recommendations of this report, which I endorse wholeheartedly and ask the Minister not just to pay lip service to, but to accept. And just on the recommendations of this report, I couldn't put my opposition to recommendation 34 any more eloquently than the member for Macarthur. We are here to help everyone in their time of need. And there's often no people more damaged and more in need than those who are in social housing. But I just want to add this plea to the government, to the minister at the table, to the Prime Minister, and to the government members of this committee that did endorse that so-called 3 strikes recommendation. Please don't yet let this recommendation overshadow the positive recommendations in this report. Please do not allow partisan politics by casting Liberal against Labor over our disagreement, our fierce disagreement over this recommendation, overshadow the positive recommendations in this report. Go out and talk to the media, talk to your communities about why the federal government should adopt the National Housing Strategy, about why the federal government should invest in social and public and affordable housing, about why young people, like the young people in my electorate of Dunkley, deserve their human right of secure housing now and to secure their futures so that they can access education and healthcare and have stability. Talk about those things. Talk about the recommendations and the work put in by all the submitters. Do not turn this report into a partisan wedge attack on one recommendation. And finally, I just want to join with all of the other members of the committee that have spoken today to thank the chair and the deputy chair, who are incredibly hardworking and dedicated members of this parliament, for all of the work they put into this enormous and really, really important inquiry, and to the Secretariat, without whom none of us could do the work we do and who make everyone look very good every day. Thank you, Speaker.
The member for Fisher.
Mr.